Your show's rubbish.
3, 2, 1, go.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne?
Yes.
There's no answer.
Sorry, I just want to come in here. That is you little copycat. Because I came in the last show with a song. And you come in this show. That's
but
okay.
I did it in a much more tuneful voice, almost a tenor. I've got much more of a tenor.
I've got a deeper
falsetto.
Falsetto. But yeah, welcome. It is the Trout Spinners. It's a special show today for two reasons. One, it's just before New Year. It's the 29th. But this will be going out, I believe, on New Year's Eve. And so it's kind of like a New Year's show, but also, unlike any normal show we've done before, we are jumping out of sequence, and we will not ever do this except for this special. But we are jumping out of sequence, way out of sequence, to go to the special shows, and we're reviewing both of them today. They did two shows on BBC Two when they sat in for Jonathan Ross in 2005, way after where we are now with our reviews in series 2. So they're different kind of shows. We're just going to review them both at once. But basically they're festive shows. One was done just before Christmas and the other one was done just before New Year. So they're festive shows. So we thought we would cover that festive angle. And I think we had a Patreon who suggested we do this as well. But on that Patreon, we are on Patreon. Join if you want. It'll be great. If you did, please. I don't know what my next sentence was. We had a new patron, Francis Cherry. Yeah, so thank you, Francis. So we've got 9-10 now. So yeah, really appreciate your support.
That money combined is a really good night at the pub for at least one of us.
Yeah, when pubs open in 2027.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah, but with the interest, that our money will be worth about £58.
Take a cut as well, so got to take that into my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, with the money that we have got, how are you going to be celebrating this New Year's Eve, Gaz Meister?
I still need to talk to you about that because I haven't seen any of the money, and it seems to be in your
resting in my account.
It's resting in my account. Now, I'll tell you what. Okay, here's a little quiz, listener quiz, right? What was Miles referencing there? Say it again.
That money was just resting in my account.
Okay, so it's not an XFM show. So I just wonder if any listeners.
We do talk about it a lot.
We have talked about it before. I know, but I just want to, email in if you get that reference.
It's not the first time at least one of us has made that.
I've made it about 78 times,
okay.
But I won't be. I'll probably stay in. I don't like when everything was open. I do get invites to go out on New Year's.
Yeah.
Not many. I do. Two people say, "Oh, do you want to come out?" Not this year, but there's nothing going on. So, but usually I stay in. And I go to bed. I'm like Karl. I'm so like Karl with this. I'm not trying to be like Karl or saying this to be like, he's like Karl. No, but genuinely, I'm like Karl. This go to bed at 9 p.m. What's the point in staying up? Miserable old man. That's me.
Wait at 12. Go to the toilet. Look at yourself in the mirror and go, good that we made it through. Back to sleep.
New Year. Yeah. I don't have any mirrors.
No.
Trust
me, you can tell. You can really tell.
I'm looking a bit scruffy. Well, my hair's long and my beard's long. Well, yeah, it's just
going to get longer as well.
Yes, well, we were talking about this off air. Like we didn't get haircuts just before we went into tier 4, and that's another thing. So basically, obviously, we're going to reflect on the year a bit. Reflecting on the year is different this year, and we were saying off air actually, when people do this, people use cliches about it as well. So we're going to try and steer clear of cliches, but this year has been all about COVID, and there's been other things going on actually. Some listeners have I was thinking of where listeners said they've lost people, and so what I'm saying is there's other things to other people, but yeah, it's been a very, very strange year. What you kind of, I mean, on a serious note, how are you kind of reflecting on moving into a new year and looking back at this year in a
Well,
non-cliche way?
I'm actually doing things that brought me happiness a while ago. So today I made sausage and mash
Okay.
because I really fancy some sausage and mash and I haven't had it in a while.
What are you,
And
Bodger and Badger?
on a genuine note, if you are going to make sausage and mash, people, use some great Maris Piper potatoes and add in a little bit of celeriac, and it just makes a really sort of creamy, kind of rooty sort of flavour. And yeah, I made some homemade gravy, some caramelised onion in there, and some Yorkshire puddings. I've been big on the Yorkshire pudding scene at the moment.
Okay.
You can probably tell I've got way too much time on my hands.
Yeah. I just like the fact that I asked you to kind of, reflect on the 2020 as a whole, your experiences, your thoughts, your feelings. And you just told me that you cooked sausage and mash today.
Yeah, but
and,
how
and
much
you
do
put
you want
you put a little bit of celeriac in.
Yeah, but how much do you want that now?
You
Are you
you
thinking
make
about it now?
No, oh no, I haven't got a Domino's in the fridge.
And you don't have a chow mein because you ate them for your Christmas dinner when everyone else was having turkey, and no one does that on the Christmas day ordinarily, do they?
No, I've got something in the fridge. I don't know what it is. But
You asked me serious though. What I want to do next year, give up smoking is always there, right? New Year's resolutions, that's always there. That will never disappear until I'm dead.
yeah.
Second one, read more. I want to read more. Like Karl, I don't want to learn, but well, you do learn as a result of reading. I want to read like at least, I don't know, a book a month. I think that's a good thing to aim for. And also to do something that makes you proud or happy, or just it could be a little thing just every single day, whether it's I don't know, make something new for dinner or something old like sausage and mash,
Yeah.
or do a podcast, go for a nice long walk, just
You
do
hang on.
something
I
that you
have.
can talk to other people about, because something I have struggled around this year is just the lack of things to talk about, because there's nothing going on.
Well, actually, conversely, I think there's. I mean, I know what you mean. Like, there's nothing nor like you can't talk about what you did in the pub last night or where you went in general. But there's lots going on. It's just contextualized in this sort of COVID bubble that the whole country is in, and it's like a lot of things going on related to COVID. So if you're at home all day, it's boring and you think nothing's going on. You think you're doing nothing, but you're actually doing things, and they're different to what you would normally do. You say like read a book, like that will be actually well suited to this time. But
Yeah.
if it was a normal time, you probably wouldn't read a book a month. And I can
Actually,
I can tell the audience now, Mars will not be reading a book a month.
I will.
That's
I've got a book a month. I've bought them all. They're
I
sitting there,
how many?
hiding up dust, and they will get touched. And I'm not even going to go for audiobooks, because I normally go for audiobooks because I like having
Have
someone.
you got through Roger Red Hat yet, or is that to come?
Roger Redder.
Yeah, did you never
But
do that?
no, I'm
Roger
not,
Red.
because I'm not as old as you.
No, I think they still had them around. It's not like like books. Like suddenly after like the book's
Mm.
been written, after that year they burned them all.
Yeah,
um,
Fahrenheit 451.
Roger Red Hat was the first book I ever read, and it was basically it teaches you to read as a 4 or 5 year old. And Jennifer Yellow Hat. They were a bit, they weren't that creative with their titles. But yeah, okay, well, you read a book a month, fair enough. But I think that I don't tend to make news resolutions because they tend to be things
Be
that
less single.
you do. Yeah, yeah, exactly. These are unrealistic goals. Do you know what I mean? Well, you set something realistic. No, that's not my goal. But I think that yeah, 2021 is going to be a strange year as well because I haven't done this, but I saw someone on Facebook who I'm friends with on Facebook post this that he had, because you can see where you are in line for the vaccine. He's got a similar profile to me. He's a bit older than me. I don't think he's got health problems, and he posted what it said, and it said he was something like 20 millionth in line, and it would be roughly in June or July when he gets the vaccine. So that's not I'm not saying that like, oh my God, it's so far away. I know it's going to take a long time, but it is, until you vaccinated a certain percentage of the country, you don't get herd immunity. So it's still going to be spreading up to July, June, August. We're planning to go to Edinburgh again. I reckon that'll be cancelled. I hope it's not.
I hope not. I mean, anything that isn't, I'll take any kind of social activity that isn't a Zoom quiz night. Although my sister's table present was a 90s and noughties music quiz.
Well
And
said.
it was like a trivia music quiz with loads of cards. I steamrolled through that quiz. I knew every single answer, bar one or two. So I'm on cloud nine with my superfluous kind of understanding of that period's hits and tits and
Hits and hits. Shit parade, hit parade. Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't have done so well in that. 90s, yeah, but that's not my thing. But yeah, I know what you mean. Your point about Zoom and like this is all right. I find sort of this is better than nothing. Where we're Skyping now.
Yeah.
That's how we do the show. We Skype. And sometimes when we've had a guest on, there's a third person in the window. Oh, that's about the limit for me. Once it gets to 4 or 5 people, I just
Yeah,
stop liking it.
what you mean.
Who's speaking when? You don't have these cues to kind of tell you that someone is, because it's a slight delay, so everyone speaks
Yeah.
over and then stops
What?
and then starts again. They've started
What?
again. Miles and I never do that. but yeah, it's just we're just getting used to. But life is different. But it's in many ways it's still the same.
It is. And for 2021, don't worry, because there's going to be a lot more D-Trout spinners and
Yeah.
a lot more guests, hopefully, and a lot more
Hopefully.
Patreon shows and some
Well,
video
that's
stuff.
my ambition, is to get Claire Sturgis on the show. That's my New Year's resolution.
Good
Is to
one.
kind of somehow get Claire on the show. We you never know. Maybe Karl, but it's unlikely. The show, yeah, kind of resolutions. Just make it better.
Make it better.
Do
How long
better
we
stuff.
got? Yeah.
But we will be going into episode 38. And episode 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, they're some of my favourite episodes in a row of the show. And it's going to be fun reviewing them. But for today, as I say, and we're going to get to it right now, we've got the specials that they did in 2005, Christmas 2005, sitting in for Jonathan Ross. There's 2 of them. We're going to review them both together. And coming up, we'll have our favourite quotes. We'll have a general discussion about the shows and what we think about them. We'll have X of them in the community, if there's been anything. But basically, it's been Christmas, it's been New Year. You've all been busy. We understand. So there's been less feedback, but we will. I did a poll last week, and I was going to mention it on the Patreon show, and I didn't. So I'll mention the poll. But XFM in the community is a little bit lighter this week, but it's still to come up. And apparently, we're going to put 2 songs in the library that I need to check my iPod for.
Well, I'm actually going to be putting in 2 songs from this side, because
Okay.
I think it's going to be nice for people to have the D-Trout Spinners libraries when we put in our 2 favourite songs for that particular week, and you can have that on in the background maybe as you're seeing in the new year.
Wait, like when you do that, are there all the songs listed on, like, can they click on the song from our link page?
We've been through
I
this,
don't
Gary.
understand. No, I know, but
But
you never explained it properly.
you find the song on Spotify, then you go to the little 3
What?
3 ellipses next to it. You click on that, right? And then it says add to playlist. You add to the particular playlist that you want to listen to, and then you will listen. Then when you go on that particular playlist, in which case this one's called the D-Trout Spinners Library, you click track 1. It will then cycle through all of them in sequence or random, depending on how you have set up your Spotify. And that is a feature that I like to call Explain Spotify to Gary Forrestal.
Okay, another one coming up next week, because I'll ask next week as well.
So
But
kick us off.
yeah, I mean, I basically, the shows happened in 2005, Christmas 2005, and they were like a one-off. And I'm pretty sure, because they hadn't done a show since 2004, mid-2004, they obviously were being approached. And I know Jonathan is friends with Ricky, so I'm sure that's part of why they arranged it. But I think they had in their head at this time podcasting, which was very new back then, but they hadn't done a podcast. But I think this was like a test couple of episodes that they agreed to do because they had in their mind to start the podcast. And it shows in the kind of quality of the shows. Basically, I think the shows are very good compared to a normal radio show, but they're not like say from series 2 that we're reviewing now. The shows, they're basically more. They're more contrived than the natural shows that we're reviewing still in series 2. They have great chat about Steve's looks, and Steve's looks is always going to be a good topic to chat about. But on series 2, which we're reviewing now, and in series 1 as well, and to an extent 3 and 4, those discussions and topics came up naturally, whereas here they just basically say, you know, what did you think of Steve's looks, right near the beginning of the first one. They know it's good material, and it's like they're using material that they already know works, and it's funny, but it's just not as good as listening, for me, to a show from series 2 that we're reviewing, or 1 or 3 or 4. It basically sounds to me like a podcast, their podcast, but with music. There are differences, there are definitely differences, but it's very much, I think, an early test. It's like a pilot episode in their heads, I think, for what they were going to go on to do, which was the podcasts. And I think that it's still got merit, but they're not as entertaining overall. But they are good. There's some fun moments, some fun lines, which we'll get to, and things. One thing I did like is that we had a listener say last week that they had just discovered the shows very recently. They were talking about listening to them for the first time, and you can never recreate that. But with the shows, what I've found is if you give a long gap between when you listen, it kind of it resets it a bit, so it is closer to listening for the first time. And with these two shows, I haven't listened to these two shows for a couple of years, and I got that kind of new show feel. There were bits that I didn't quite remember what was going to happen, whereas the ones we all listen to, we all know exactly what's going to be said and how it's going to be said and things. So that was a nice experience. It was almost like listening for the first time again, because it had been so long. But other than that, I was, you know, they were just good. They were like the podcast, you know. But we've decided to kind of review the XFM radio shows, and I think there's a reason for that, and there's part of the reason was showing in this show. Although they are good, you know, they're good, but they're just not what I would consider top quality shows. But they do have merit, and they are funny. There's some very funny moments between Ricky and Steve, and there's some sweet moments as well. But I'll get to them, what I think about them. But what are your thoughts?
So I think first and foremost, it's just a hilarious prospect to think that the BBC, obviously with Ricky's profile, it's not that much of a surprise that he got on. But given the sort of shambolic nature of the XFM shows, and at this point, you know, they mention it in the show, you know, Karl talks about a leaving present. He just left XFM at that point after, you know, over 10 years at that station. And so they knew what they're letting themselves in for, but it's so funny, the kind of outrageous kind of product placement that they go along with, you know, constantly mentions of Flanimals or extras on DVD. And also, like, just on the sort of note on the sort of bias of, you know, having to play sort of centre, in that they do sort of align themselves with certain political ideologies. Like Ricky talks about fox hunting at one point, and he also says, I'm an atheist and I'm trying to help him out when Karl's trying to do his sermon.
He is. No, I don't think Ricky's aligning himself with anything there. I think one thing Ricky is.
But you're not meant to do that, though, are you? On like the BBC, you're not meant to.
I think you're allowed to say you're against fox hunting. What you can't do is promote an activist gathering of anti-fox hunters, and you're allowed to see.
It is disgusting, by the way. I don't like fox hunting either. Let me just make that absolutely clear.
Love it. Get some grabs as well.
Is that fox?
No, I hate it. Of course, we the Trout Spinners does not endorse animal cruelty in any form, and that's true. But I don't think that's naughty. I just thought it's funny, the silly things, like when they're talking about what to call a willy. Yeah, you know, it's just.
What did you call yours as a child?
Oh, I've got a question for you around that. Well, let's start with this chat, and I will answer that. But there's a chat about, is it Steve who's going to the, I think it's just, they're just contemplating Karl going to the doctor with a problem there, and what would he say to the doctor, and then they get on to what would you call it. But that reminded me of you, that chat, because Mars has huge anxiety about problems in that sort of area, and I would say this,
generally,
I'll acknowledge we all do to some extent, with good reason, but Mars particularly. I've spoke to Mars for over an hour before about problems he's got. He doesn't go into too much detail, but you know, I know that is kind of pertinent to you. So what did you think hearing that?
I mean, do up my trousers now so you don't have to look at that lump.
No, keep them undone.
Do you know what? We've talked about this before. I get so much comfort and reassurance whenever they talk about issues downstairs, or any kind of going to the doctor's anxiety, because I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I know there's this cliche that all men are hypochondriacs, and that is kind of warranted, to be fair. They, have a litmus test of most men that I meet. Most men are kind of like that, but it is also quite a serious thing, and it is nice to hear it talked about. And it is, you can kind of, because you can laugh about it as well when it's someone else talking about it.
And you can empathise, I
Yeah,
guess. That's an
100%.
interesting point. So you felt empathy because you felt, well, like it's like yeah, it's giving you that thing of it's not just me.
Yeah.
It was like
And
this.
also hearing someone like Ricky Gervais, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
Because it's just, I don't know, for some reason I could see him as quite a sort of a tough kind of mentally and sort of physically in a
yeah.
way kind of person who you think, oh, nothing bothers him. He's not
We could
fazed
stand
by
in front of an
confidence.
audience,
100%. So
thousands.
seeing I don't know, seeing that vulnerability and to some extent authenticity of the radio. There's no pretending that. I can imagine. I know all of those stories would be 100% true, and I'm pretty sure they'll do. I mean, for Christ's sake, Carl had his prostate examined on the last episode of An Idiot Abroad series 2.
Yeah, yeah.
I just can't. That's entertainment. And Ricky's obviously done it because he partly 50% cares and 50% really wants to see his ass on the telly.
Yeah, well, he knows how much he would. That's his like ultimate
Oh,
thing.
that is such a
But
fantastic. I'll put it in this show, that description. But
seen it, yeah.
that episode of An Idiot Abroad is just quality. That is so funny. You're just in stitches half the time.
Yeah. Well, like that, like that was entertaining. I found the chat not in a because we like one thing we're not is we're not like we or one thing we are is bit prudish. We're kind of we're not we don't laugh at things like wheelies and funny words like that. And but I found the chat of when they were discussing what to call a willy was what I call a willy, and actually that's my answer to your question. I called it a willy. I still
So
do.
did I.
But that was one of the examples, and there's a few of them on these two shows of old style XFM days chat. And I've just written here, excellent. I really like that because it just was such a naturally flowing chat, and it was nice. It just reminded me of. It took me back to the XFM days, and they could still do it then. So they still
Well, they do that, and also they talk about a lot of the stuff that they will then go on to talk about in the podcast. So there's the going to the shop with the Russian wood, that antiquities store in St James's Street. Yeah, Ricky takes Karl, and there's a door buzzer, but there's no point in being open because it's so bloody quiet, and all this stuff is really fucking expensive. My opinion on I've got some strong opinions on Ricky in these two sort of in this double bill. I do find him a bit of a great pretender. Like, he does really try to sell this idea that he's into his antiques and he's really kind of like he knows a lot about history and philosophy and all this stuff, and that's kind of an extension of that story. And I actually think Carl's saying some really funny stuff. I've always thought that story is quite funny. What's the newest thing you got in here? Like, how often do you get new stuff in?
And his great point that what do you do when you run out because they're not making new ones.
It's a good point. I mean,
it's a funny point. It is a funny point.
It's got a legitimate answer, but it's still a very, very funny thing to say. But Ricky, there is something about Ricky's voice and his like constant sighs and interruptions during these episodes that for me, and I know you're saying that you kind of liked this to them, I actually got very, very frustrated with Ricky during these episodes. He did not let Karl finish loads of stories. For numerous times, he just calls him he just calls him an idiot time and time again. And what really was, nail on the head was him interrupting him during Rockbusters. I found that excruciating and intolerable to the point where you've got Steven saying, let him finish, for Christ's sake. And it's like Ricky's trying so hard he knows what he's created there with that team of presenters. He knows what is created, but he is trying to artificially construct that sort of antagonism between them. And for me, it screams of inauthenticity, screams of falseness. And it's like when someone's eating on the radio, it's really unbearable to listen to. When someone can't even get their fucking sentence out and someone's constantly interrupting them. And Christ, I'm one to speak, but I do find it incredibly annoying to listen to. Sorry.
I know. I don't disagree. You're saying, oh, you like that chat. The bit I'm saying, there's some examples in there of 2 or 3 minute bursts where it is like the XFM days, but those are rare on these shows. And the first thing I said was, this is like a gateway to the podcasts. On the podcast, the only difference is there's no music, and they would be calling Karl an effing C rather than an idiot, a bloody idiot, because they're kind of, the language doesn't matter on the podcast. So it actually does matter, like morally, but it doesn't matter legally. So it's very constructed. As I said, the chat about Steve's looks at the very beginning
I love
of the first
that.
one. I love that, but it's not a natural. You notice in the XFM days, it comes up because of other things that are being talked about, the posters or something. And yeah, Ricky still plays the role of, tries to, just he kind of fans the flames, but here he's not kind of, I wouldn't say he's even kind of fanning the flames of antagonism. I would just say he's just doing it directly himself. What's funny with Ricky is when he's getting Karl to wind up Steve, or Steve to wind up Karl, but that's not what's happening here. He's just winding up Karl himself, like by being a bit obtuse. And I tend to agree with you. He's not, but I do overall find quite a bit of entertainment in the shows. We wouldn't have done these 2 shows if we didn't find them at least have some merit, and there is some merit to the shows, but they are so different. And people often say to us, well, they wish Ricky and Steve and Karl would come back again. That's an example of just 1 year since they last did a podcast, the decent ones, series 4. How much it changed. Now, 15 years, if you had 15 years, that would change. It would just be completely different. So I don't want to hear them again in a room. And this podcast is an example of, this radio show, these 2 radio shows are examples of why I wouldn't want that. But having said that, there are funny moments, and it's generally, if I was listening to it live, which I didn't, I would generally find it entertaining. Ricky, the other thing about Ricky, he's a real. I'm annoyed at his hypocrisy. To be fair, he states it. He says, I'm an atheist, but I'm saying these things about religion, to teach Karl. But the way he kind of courts and covets the interaction from priests and vicars, there seem to be quite a few that are actually listening. And one makes a very funny point that when I've quit doing a job where I work 1 day a week, I'll sit on my arse and do bugger all week or whatever. It's a very funny comment from one of the vicars, but he kind of courts them. Now he has crushed them over the years, not literally, but through his rhetoric, and kind of completely undermined them, which I agree with Ricky's sentiment on that. On his actual background, I agree it's not true in that sense, but he's treating them with kid gloves, and he's treating them almost like, I don't know, he's being a bit like disingenuous, I think, to kind of bring these priests in and pretend like he cares about religion. He never pretends, oh, I believe it's true. He's clear, I'm an atheist on this show. He's clear about that. I don't have a problem with him being nice to priests on this show. My problem is the hypocrisy that's come subsequently from his behaviour and rhetoric towards people of faith. So, but again, I agree with the underlying sort of philosophy that of religion, that it's not useful or things, but I just didn't like how he was kind of coveting all those priests and vicars and kind of treating them like nicely, like he's a nice guy when it comes to that. Because actually, at times over the last few years, he hasn't been a nice guy when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, he does make a point of him being an atheist, which
so he's not
to come up in the first time of many times after that. It's funny because he doesn't really talk about on the XFM show. I think that's why I like him. He doesn't talk so much about his political leanings and his ideologies so much in XFM shows, but from podcast onwards, and especially in the stand-up, you are getting that by the barrel load. He is just saying that every other fucking sentence, and it's just, I don't know, there's nothing more boring than someone just repeating themselves. And for me, these episodes, whilst I do agree with you, there are things to enjoy in them, but as a seasoned, XFM listener, I know all of these stories. But then you've got to think, who is this episode for? It's
Well,
not
we
for.
know.
It's wait. It's not for your XFM target audience who sort of growing up and listen to these people weekly. This is for a completely new audience on Radio 2, and they've got 6 hours to get across who Karl is. They kind of know who Ricky and Steve are. But so I totally recognise that these stories are going to come up, and you just have to sort of run with it and go with it. But it is also, pretending that you're hearing the story of Karl being sick at the Rampack, or
Yeah.
that Karl's seeing that horse in the house. Again, what do you mean? What do you mean? You know what he means. He's talked to you this about a million fucking times. But those things would be really, really funny to like a new audience. I think they would be, if you've never ever been aware of these guys before, and you're kind of prepared to put up with the shoddiness. I think that's what you're kind of banking on, isn't it? You're counting on the.
That's why I like the show.
patience.
That's my favourite element is the shoddiness. They did keep the shoddiness. They didn't do it all like set and neat and things, which I wouldn't have liked. But I think that there's a lot of signposting going on in the show. There's a lot of signposting from the past. So they take stories from the past. They also take things that aren't stories like from Karl's childhood, but like Steve's looks, and they know, but they kind of introduce them more formulaically. I know I just said the show is unplanned, and it is in general, but they introduce things that they know were funny in those days formulaically.
Yeah.
You make a good point. It isn't for people who've heard the XFM shows. Probably it's for them as well, but it's they've also got to cater to an audience who doesn't know who Karl is, and they do this introduction to Karl thing. But it's and probably from those two shows, which would have had listener figures probably 10 times higher than the XFM shows, a lot of people to this day would have got into the whole body of work through those shows. So I don't, it's good that they place, and that there is merit to them. They're not terrible, but it's kind of just reminds me of they take from the past and they signpost to the future. So there's stuff they use in the future and there's stuff they use in the past. I think they just use this show as a pre-run for the podcast, which they were already at the time, and it's sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. I think the bit that gave me most pleasure, not the bit of the show, but the thing was that it had been so long since I'd heard it. So to hear something new probably gave me more of an impression that I liked it rather than I would have normally had.
Some of the best bits about this radio show are those stories that you haven't heard before, like Karl passing on the camera as a gift for Suzanne. XFM, he's been with XFM for bloody ages. They've got a present, and he brings the story up and he says, this is in the Christmas Eve special, can I pass this present off as a gift for Suzanne, despite the fact that, it was given to me by my past employer? And they get into big old debate about it. But I just want to get your thoughts on it. It was like, what was it, a £250 camera?
Yeah.
He was anxious about, unwrapping it in front of them. And that Suzanne might be listening. And Karl will often do this, when he talks about, having a fat ass. Yeah, like Dave said, he'll often just put himself in deep water for no reason at all, just because.
I know.
What I love about Karl, and a problem that I've encountered is just because I'm a bit of an oversharer as well, but it can get you in so much trouble.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we're very careful about mentions of any partners here. Well, I don't have one, but so that's easy. But yeah, I know what you mean. That's a good bit of chat. I think my favourite bit is actually, just to come to not my favourite bit, but another bit that's quite sweet that I hadn't heard before. I don't know if you've heard it before, but it was the story of Karl buying a catalogue for the old woman.
I love that.
That's really sweet.
Yeah,
it's a really sweet story, and it's just nice, and the way they try and make humour out of it, but actually it's just a sweet story. I'd never heard that before. I don't know if I've missed it in the XFM shows, but if you haven't heard it, probably not. My favourite talk of the show that sounded most like the XFM of the both shows, that sounded most like XFM. You're going to say this is like the most insignificant bit of audio. This is like nothing.
This is classic Gary. Classic Gary is he will take, because you look over things with a microscope.
But this isn't even microscope. This is just. I love the talk, the little dialogue they got into about the beige jacket with white pads.
Yeah,
on.
that's
I would say, if you haven't listened to these shows, listen to both in their entirety. I would. There's value in it. But if you don't have time, go to source out. I can't remember which one it's in now, but source out the jacket story, and it's they get into a little dialogue, and it's obviously not something that was planned. Oh, that jacket, and it's like, oh, that jacket, you see this jacket? Yeah, it's got white bits on here. Yeah, I'm just going to the toilet now, but you can see that. So I'm just before I go to the toilet, you can see it, and it reminded me of things like
that the jacket was on.
Notice the fact that the jacket was on, and it just reminded me of things like when they got into dialogues about the it's a jacket.
It's a jacket.
And they say, what does he say? Like, yeah, I'm a 32. 32. No, don't discuss it though. I'm 32.
Don't look at it now.
Okay, 32. Don't look at it now. It reminded me of those chats, and it was my favourite moment of the whole podcast.
That little bit of improv reminded me so much of it's just jacket talk, isn't it? In The Simpsons with the Hanks. In fact, I didn't give him my coat.
Oh yeah, that's an.
And he's sitting, and he's got his coat on back to front.
Yeah, I think I know that. But our Simpsons podcast will be launched next year.
There's too many Simpsons.
We could do one.
There's a great story as well, which is very like an anecdote that they told on the Claire Sturgis ones. It's talking about Ricky being invited to the palace.
It's the same anecdote. No, sorry, that's not. No. He gets to the Bowie house. He gets to the same anecdote. But the Queen being invited to the palace is a new thing. But he kind of blends that, and he loves mentioning his dinner.
Oh.
So much, and who wouldn't in a way? But he really loves it. He went from the palace to the Bowie, and he loves telling that story of going to meet a friend the next day and saying, "What did you do last night?" Because I've heard him say this in interviews. I've heard him say it on the XFM shows. I've heard him say it so many times. What did you do last night? And he says, "Oh, nothing." Because he couldn't think of anything to say. So that again, that's an example of something that it's funny first time, but not necessarily funny the next time. Like chatting about Steve's looks. Yes, that's always going to be funny to some extent. But that anecdote where he says to his mate, "I did nothing last night." I don't want to keep hearing that. I haven't. It's not like he says it all the time, but it's not good enough.
I've not heard that before.
Oh, have you not?
No.
He absolutely says it, and way before then. I thought it was on the XFM shows. Maybe it's not. If you haven't heard it, maybe it isn't. But he's talked about that. Saying
I don't. Yeah, I can imagine.
Okay, if you haven't heard it, it's quite. Yeah, it is.
It's something because it's just one of those things that Ricky Gervais has had that Stephen hasn't. Yeah. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. You put the same amount of work in. Well, obviously Ricky was David Brent, and it's hard to then untangle the writing from the performance when he's so front and center, and David Brent is a popular culture icon. He is so huge.
But didn't you get a kind of feeling of? I got a bit of a feeling of a tinge of sadness when I heard Steve say, and it was true at that point. He said, I'm after he said he's got invited to the palace. He said, I'm involved in all the work that you do except your stand up. And think of that statement now.
No.
Think of how much now they've done apart. And actually, it's probably a good thing because we're saying, they probably needed to go their separate ways. But, it made me a bit sad now because almost everything after that, not everything after that, but they started to diverge. But the way they've ended up now, like Steve would say, we do no work together whatsoever. Maybe we will in the future. And I've heard him say similar to that, but it's just funny seeing or hearing him in 2005 say all the work we do is joint.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a thing about it's a bit sad, like about how duos can kind of break up and friendships kind of break up.
What are you trying to say, Gary? What are you trying to say?
Well, I'm going off to make that American wrestling show film with my family. So we're going to go our separate. No, but didn't that make you feel like,
yeah, no, I love talk about. I've got such a fascination with duos and double act, generally in the sort of politics that go into play there. I don't know. It's always been tinged with sadness. My feelings for those two and what happened, and no one will really know. In reality, I don't think anything has happened.
No, I don't think
it is sad, but it's What I do mental is that Ricky's being offered, like I saw like a bit in the newspaper the other day, like he's being offered like 5 million to do a third series of Afterlife, and it's like, what?
No, it's actually more when you count outside investors and things. Apparently, like I saw him interviewed and outside this big mansion. It's like a country estate.
Yeah.
And he said to the interview, and I don't begrudge him this, because that is kind of, I don't find this that arrogant. He basically said, this is what Afterlife's bought me.
Wow.
This is what I bought. So yeah, you know, the one thing about Ricky is you can't say he's chased the money over the years, because
No.
he's like Andrew Phillips told us, and I'd heard this story before, that he'd been offered. I'd heard it from Ricky. He'd been offered like something like 3 million to do a bourbon commercial or a whiskey commercial, something like that, and he said no, I'm not doing it. So and he's earned that money and more through doing work that he believes in. So that side of Ricky, I don't begrudge him making so much money now, even on something I don't particularly like, because he's never chased the money, and that's one thing you can say about Ricky.
But when I listened to, because I had a bit of an Office binge after our little Patreon episode, still available by the way, and I went back and I watched loads of The Office again, and obviously always is a pleasure to watch. And then I thought, oh, I'm gonna hang around here, and I watched Feeling a Bit Festive, obviously because I'd also ran out of our Royal Family to watch as well.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
has been on
Got to do the Royal
since
Family.
the 1st of December. Yeah, if you're not from the UK, please do check out Royal Family. You won't regret it. But I watched the Extras Christmas special, and my God, it's so incomparable compared to.
Yeah, you can't go to.
They're so, and how, I don't know, it becomes incredibly obvious that Ricky Gervais is then making a point about fame. He's obsessed with this idea by fame. I think you would be if you fell into it that quickly, but I don't know, it's just that thing of get some more ideas. I can't, that episode was literally rife with cliche.
Yeah, but
and
to be fair, it was supposed to be a theme running for Extras. You've always been more of an Extras fan than I have. I think some of it's funny.
I think there's some really funny bits in it. But
Funniest thing about Extras is the outtakes. They are classic.
Yeah.
They are unbelievably funny. But I don't, you know, it's just, you can't compare it to The Office. And if you do watch it directly after watching The Office, it's probably the worst time to watch it, because you know you're seeing what they did do. I don't begrudge them for the second piece of work together on TV not being as good as The Office. Almost nothing could have been. But yeah, he does hammer home that point of fame. And I always remember the scene in The Extras where, because he makes this point about catchphrases, and he kind of makes it sometimes on the XFM shows. You can see the early kind of genesis of the ideas for Extras, some of them in the XFM shows. You know, they're sitting in the audience with the Little Britain catchphrases on their t-shirts, like there's 10 in a row of them or something. He made that point several times throughout the episode. Then you've got the visual, and it's like, yeah, people get into catchphrases in a way that's silly, but they're not as obsessed as you think they are. Like his obsession is not about fame, it's almost about people, normal people who aren't famous, and what they pick up on, what they kind of gravitate.
I don't think it's his right.
No, it's arrogant.
To say that, though.
You don't think what?
I don't think it's his right to say that.
That is the point I'm making. That's the exact point.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm saying he's making a point about, not about fame as such, which he does have some authority to speak about, but he's making a point about how people who aren't famous gravitate towards silly things. And it's not, you know, these two people in t-shirts in the audience, it's like, no one, yeah, there might be one or two people who do that, but they're not, people aren't that stupid. And my exact point was, it's not his right to make those points. He can make the point that some people do, and it's fair enough, some people do, but Extras isn't really about fame, it's about people who aren't famous and what they gravitate towards.
That's interesting.
And that part of that, I've always thought that about Extras, and that part of Extras I don't particularly like, because it's like, well, one, he doesn't know what people are like, what people gravitate towards. Yes, people do gravitate towards silly catchphrases, that's true, some people do, but in general it's like he's mocking the general public, or the G.
Yeah.
Do you know, in if you're famous, you say GP.
What, like as in general practitioner?
No, general public. That's how you talk.
Oh, right.
About the GP. There's They say, "Oh yeah, the
That's
GP
really annoying.
at my house today." Yeah, I know. But that's what Ricky's making a point of in extras, and that I never really like. And also, it's just not as funny as The Office. So when you combine those two things together,
I just don't think they can do satire as well as other people, as Chris Morris, as Armando Iannucci. They can do it, but all those jokes they make in, XFM, they're going, oh, it could be a satire. I'm going to be on, never mind, I'll be on Have I Got News for You. I just don't think they're as good satirists as they think they are. It's good to have an idea, but to run with it for as long as they did, I don't think so.
I think they're very good satirists when working without a script and just riffing, and they can do little sudden dialogues between themselves that are good satire. But yeah, taking a piece of satire and making it a narrative through a TV piece is not their strong point. It's not. The Office isn't satire, and it's much better. Yeah, I think they're a bit, can come across a bit preachy, and basically the way I describe these two shows, that were, just to get back to the two shows that we're reviewing, they're kind of a bit like a good episode of Extras, whereas what we're reviewing now is like The Office, which is if you're comparing, sort of comparing them to TV shows, they're not the same, I know, but that's how I would see it, because we're doing classic episodes at the moment that are brilliant and timeless in general from series 2, and now we've come to just do these special shows, and it's a bit like
It's quite funny because at the end of these shows, at the very end, and they go to some of the correspondence from what would have been their regular listeners from the Jonathan Ross show, and they go, Ricky Gervais, all you do is slag people off. You're rude about the world. I'm surprised people listen to you.
Yeah, no, that's good that they still read that out.
I mean, it's great because it's just I love that too, because loads of shows only read out the good stuff, so it's great when you get stuff like that.
Yeah, no, but John Robbins and Ellis James, you've told me this, are good at doing that, and I've always thought that's a very sign of a good show, a confident show. Someone made the point as a listener that Ricky is ultra sensitive to criticism, and I don't think that's quite true, but there is some merit to that. But I think it's very specific things. Ricky is actually very comfortable with criticism from certain quarters about certain things that actually are quite personal. So it's not just one criticism that doesn't matter. He will take stuff about his weight from Steve or listeners. He'll take stuff like the stuff at the end of the episode from listeners, and he'll actually embrace it. He embraces it. But what he doesn't like is if you criticize, it's almost like he takes it as a criticism if you like Lowry, oh, how dare, and you can't criticize, or like I'm obviously right. I take that as a personal insult, that you don't follow exactly what I believe in terms of the world of art. So he's can be ultra sensitive, you could say, in that regard. But in general, he's not sensitive to criticism, I don't think, and that's a good example of it. And again, that's one of the highlights of the show. I love it when they read out stuff like that.
As we approach we're gonna have a little break, I think, soon. But as we approach our sort of quotes and a bit of XFM in the community, I thought it might be quite nice, Gary, as we reach this sort of period where people are being quite reflective. Do you have a Wogan's thought for the day?
Oh, the thought for the day.
Yeah. Something you could just leave the listeners of D-Trout Spinners with for their sort of continued support throughout this time. The slowly increasing listener figures.
You've got me there. Well, I want to, obviously it's something quite profound about the year. I'm thinking about 2020 in general. I would say always cover leftover pizza with foil and not cling film.
We'll see you after the break.
Welcome back to the D-Trout Spinners. We just had a little break there. Miles is munching a little chocolate Yule log. What is that? Chocolate straw.
It's like a wafer. Do you remember those? What are they called? This is a bad way to come back.
No, it's okay. Go on.
Remember, they're like a wafer curl with some cream in. They're nice.
I don't remember them, but yeah, you've been eating a lot of sweets because it's reminded you of being back home.
Usually when I'm at home, I'd be eating like a little bit of a cake or, I don't know, some profiteroles or something like that. You know, you've always got something on the go, haven't you? Like at Christmas, always those unopened
It's a
tins of
monster bread.
sweets.
Mine has.
But this year my sister kindly sent me some Yellow Belly like Haribo sweets, and I've got a little bit of a sweet tooth after you've had your dinner, whatever. And I normally nosh on a few of them. I'm just worried about this will now be my new Christmas tradition that when I will always just go to gluten like sort of pig fat sweets as opposed to a lovely bit of Christmas pud, say.
Bit of gelatin.
Yeah, a bit of gelatin as opposed to like a lovely thing like this could be when we look back and I'm eating those yellow bellies in the future, I'm gonna be going, oh, that was Christmas 2020 when I was all alone. That was just me there sitting there and drinking apple cider. Who could or could not sponsor us? It's totally up to them. Yeah, my tradition has been ruined. But hey, traditions are there to be broken, and we don't have to stick to our traditions, do we?
No, and that's the thing about traditions. They are our traditions. Each and every one of us has different kind of traditions, and they evolve and develop over time. But what is a tradition? Say, for example, eating Brussels sprouts. I don't do that because I don't like it. So you don't. You can pick which traditions apply to you and which are pertinent to you.
Why don't you like
And
Brussels sprouts?
I just really don't like them, and I like bitter food. I like bitter
They're
vegetables.
not bitter
I
if you
like
cook them
I
right.
love broccoli, but I just don't like Brussels sprouts. I'm just saying that we can have, like, if you ate Haribo Yellow Bellies every year from now on, and that became your tradition, that's okay. I mean, it's probably not okay for your spleen or whatever, wherever the
Spleen.
well, yeah, because it is insulin.
Okay.
Traditions are very personal to us. So, you can have that tradition. I'll allow it, but please don't eat any
Thanks.
more on the show.
I won't.
He had to re-record a little bit because he was munching as he was speaking. Anyway, so we're just going to wrap up now, so it won't be too long. We're going to do our favourite quotes from.
Don't be too excited about it, Gary. Christ.
No, sorry. I'm underselling it as usual, but it really isn't worth listening to. But if you want to listen, we're going to do our favourite quotes.
Okay, I'll start off. I'm doing Mummy now. Leave it. I
Yeah,
love that Ricky's talking about how he intends to shave millions of listeners from Jonathan Ross's show, which actually he probably did do and intended to do.
Yeah, but I know he never did. He always talks about that, doing stuff like that in XFM, and he actually, in all seriousness, by saying stuff like that, you gain listenership. Oh wow, that presenter just said that. I'm now going to become a because it's so funny.
Well, there was that story, wasn't there, from like Stuart Lee. We're both a big fan of Stuart Lee, and I think a lot.
Live together.
Yeah, seen them live together. But I think a lot of fans of this podcast will probably be aware of him and his stand-up. But there was one year he did one of his tours. He put a quote from Ricky Gervais saying how much he loved it. But what Stuart Lee will always do is he'll always put really good, critically acclaimed comments against ones that are really disparaging and slagging him off from people because it is that sort of self-deprecation, things that are quite standard for like the British psyche and that sort of sense of humour.
Well, we were talking earlier about Ricky highlighting the emails from listeners that were disparaging, and kind of that's Ricky's good at that. Now, actually, Stuart Lee's much better, and one thing Stuart Lee, and I think the point you can make is that Stuart Lee says about Ricky Gervais himself, but Ricky is also good at doing that.
What's your quote?
Okay, this is right at the beginning where they're just slagging him off. It's Happy Christmas and that.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got about 8 quotes. 5 of them are from the first 5 minutes of the first show.
I had exactly the same, but I thought that's too much. But
I've just gone for it.
This one was just something that made me laugh, and it was from an email that they got him. I once got a frozen box of fish.
Yeah.
I just thought that poor bastard.
The guy who got crude oil as well.
Yeah, that's very funny. What kind of oil does he like?
Yeah, that's good.
It made me laugh because I was just thinking about my stepdad who was a HGV driver. Unfortunately, has been made redundant this year. It's starting to bring the mood down, isn't it? But I remember once he got. Most people get a bonus, don't they? If you're a paper boy, if you're a milkman, you might get a sneaky 20, or if you worked in a bank like you did, you might get a bonus, whatever. He got like a Christmas ham, and it was just so.
That is like a Simpsons.
It was just so quaint and Suffolk, because that is such a Muppets Christmas Carol thing that you get treated to a nice Christmas glazed ham.
He's not going to be like Tiny Tim this Christmas.
No.
He'll be feasting on ham.
Feast
Um,
on Frizz-
that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
I know you would have put this in, but you probably took it out because it's like too many from the beginning. But I just love it. I wouldn't paint a picture of that. It's great life. But again, it's more pre-planned, and he knew what he was going to say. Like in the early days of XFM, he never knew what he was going to say about Steve. He just rolled with it, and that's why it's so funny. Having said that, it's still really funny.
It is. But Steve's reaction to that isn't as he doesn't jump on it as much as he normally would do. He go, "Why are you doing that? I didn't slag you off."
No,
Why
but think of it just from a personal point of view, like. And I think this is human nature and human psychology. So I'm not criticising Steve for this. I think this is totally understandable. Steve, by that time, Steve was far richer, more famous, and more successful in his career. I think that kind of mitigates people having to go at you. So I don't think he's as bothered because he's done so well for himself. They actually made a character on Extras that he played that played up to his physical characteristics. Like he made millions of pounds from it. So I think he's more comfortable than he was in the XFM days. Yes, I know they made The Office, but it hadn't gone stratospheric.
Yeah.
When you're not as successful and someone's just insulting you, you feel quite bad. But when you're quite successful, he kind of dealt with it in a way that was kind of knowingly trying to stir some comedy. But yeah, he's not as bothered, clearly. And I think that's partly because of his success now.
and it's not even a quote, it's a sound. He's got some fantastic rock busters in this. They're so funny.
Yeah.
But when he's talking about that preserve or that jam isn't sharp enough, and he goes, it's just the slap of a tongue against the mouth will always make. And he does it just as he goes into another song, as it goes.
Yeah.
I didn't
notice him pick up on that, but yeah,
I
that
just
is.
loved it so, and Ricky cracks up, but just that sound alone. It was like when Ricky does the Frog Boy, he goes, "Look, it's Frog Boy." Like,
Yeah, well, Ricky does those sounds all better.
With radio, obviously you are just capturing people's dialogue largely on you, what they're saying, but it's everything else that are largely unrecognisable. But I've got quite a juvenile sense of humour as well sometimes, and just the sound of someone going or there's that's so funny in that. Like it's almost ASMR in it, how funny it is.
Yeah.
It's just
the thing I like about him doing that is that, which I didn't kind of pick up on as much as you, but now I'm thinking about it. Like, and we've talked about this with audio. Actually, audio can paint a better picture sometimes, a more complete picture than TV. Because or visual, you obviously the audience are having to complete a lot of the picture themselves when they listen to audio, but audio can guide you to a more complete picture of something that's more in line with what you want to see than TV, which kind of very clunkily can push you onto seeing something and thinking something at the same time, and visualizing it in a certain way. Whereas actually in audio you're far more free to do that. And the reason I'm making this point is because just that is a great way to let the audience kind of imagine the sharpness, because it genuinely, that's the sort of thing that is what you do. And imagine as you're listening to that, you're thinking, without knowing it consciously, you're thinking, yeah, oh god, yeah, that's sharpness. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Seen that? Like when you look at Foley artists who work on films, and you look at some of the items they use to make those
what
sounds,
is a Foley artist?
So Foley artist is someone who it says basically someone who works in sound, who creates sounds using everyday objects to add to the sound design of a film. So you know the sort of clippity clop of a
that's
horse.
coconuts, yeah.
It's coconuts, right? The sort of main one that I always come back to is the sound of an egg being opened on Jurassic Park, and that's literally just someone's hands in a bowl of petroleum jelly going.
Really?
But just knowing that, and I'm fascinated by this sort of stuff. I would have liked to have done something like that. Actually, I think it was such a fun, creative job to do.
Yeah.
To look at sound. It's such an art and precision to it. I think it's really fascinating. But that's why I love audio and radio. I think I love just the intricacies of it and
Yeah, as I say, it's more fun than TV. TV's great. It's got a place. I love The Office. We talk about The Office all the time, but it fills in a lot of the gaps for you. And actually, sometimes it's more fun to fill in those gaps
absolutely.
yourself,
Yeah.
but guided by good audio. Anyway, so is it my go?
Yeah.
What did you look like as a baby? Because I told you I took a lot from that first 5 minutes.
You did.
But that's it now. I've got a few more, but they're not from that.
Okay, that's good. I've got 2 more. So were they for his Christmas or his birthday?
That was my next one.
Was it really?
No,
I mean,
okay.
brilliant joke. Surprised that no one had made it of my knowledge, until that,
Yeah.
because Carl's kind of the first. Because that is a great. That's one of the examples where Carl's doing an actual real joke, and it's very, very funny. And also, that whole bit is very, very funny, actually. You know, the 3 wise men. They do that so well, don't they?
They do.
I spent a bit more. What'd you get? Gold. What is the son of God? I want to impress him. That is very funny.
Yeah, they're very good. That is, again, that's one of the few moments that I was talking about earlier on these 2 shows, and there are a few examples of it's XFM days. You're back. That's XFM chat that they would have had back then. It's the same. It's not. I'm not saying they're copying what they did for. I'm saying it's in the style kind of imaginings of how it was back in it.
Can I say actually something, right? Who do you think was responsible? This is actually quite a good question, or it might not be, but see what you think. Who was responsible for that kind of loss of the XFM magic? Was it down to Ricky, Steve, or Karl? I don't think we should answer that, but
I guess it works as a question. My own thoughts is, I don't want to influence people, but it's Ricky. But Ricky is by far the most responsible for why it was good in the first place. It's hard to criticise him. He is. It is so Ricky. Karl could have sat in on other shows. It would never have been anything like this. Steve is important. Karl is important. They're both important, really important. But Ricky is, and it's not just because it's the Ricky Gervais show. I just believe that Ricky's most important. But Ricky then came to use things again, reuse things. He came to be ultra aggressive to Karl rather than funnily, like in a funny way, antagonistic. He was aggressive. He became preachy. But he was responsible for why it was good. So, you know, it's yin and yang. But yeah, email in your thoughts on that, and we'll read them in the new year.
spinnerspodcast@gmail.com or tweet us Spinners Podcast. Gary, what's your next quote?
At no point was their surname mentioned.
Again, really good point. What would have Adam and Eve been? It would have been something like what was the name of the garden?
Eden.
I reckon it would be like Adam Eden or Eve Eden.
Are you actually contemplating what Adam and Eve's surname would be based on where they lived?
Yeah, could you not be named after like your occupation or where you lived?
Well, in those days, yeah, but they didn't have. That's the point. There were only 2 people. Yeah, in those days. There are only 2 people. Remember, in the whole world.
As well, to know that like they had sex and they weren't brother or sister, and then
but their brothers and sisters did.
Sex.
Yeah.
He would have had sex with his mum, which means I've had sex with your mum at some point.
What, mine? You?
Yeah.
Say, I can tell you something now. You have not, nor will ever have sex with my mum. There are many reasons for that. Now, I'm not saying that as like a mum thing. You could have been in with a shot if it was a different mum, but not with mine. But yeah, it's almost
I don't like those sort of jokes. By the way, I just made it as a like passing comment. I do not like those sort of jokes.
The way you're describing it, it's almost like the Bible didn't happen. I've got 2 more. Okay, Killing Time and that. I can't even remember where that is situated. Can you remember that? Killing Time and that. I think it's just before they go into the song. And this is one I love. It's not fun. Like, there's no laughter, and it's not supposed to be a funny line. It's just, I just love it. It's just so earnest. It just, when he introduces, he just goes, "All right, Kate Bush and that." When he goes, Kate Bush, it's not even like a laugh out loud line. It's
no, but that's so Karl, isn't it?
Yeah.
My last one is, as we wrap it up, which in a way I can use because I can say what time is it. Carl being so concerned about what he's
Oh
buying
yeah,
Suzanne for
yeah.
Christmas. He buys her a watch only so he knows what time it is, which
No,
is
he's not saying. He's saying like, actually, it's more thoughtful than what I usually get her. But actually, having thought about it, I can actually use the present as well because I can ask her what time it is. But that's just his funny way of saying
I
it's
know. If you've got your favourite quotes, spinnerspodcast@gmail.com,
or tweet us.
or Twitter, which is Spinners Podcast, which is what these lovely people did for our next feature, which is XFM in the community.
Well, we do it properly. XFM in the community. That's how it says it. We should say it like that.
Yeah.
Obviously,
What you got? What you got, Gaz? What you
well,
got? What you got on the plate?
well,
What is this feature as well? What is it?
well, this is where we go through feedback that we've received since the last show, and
It's as
uh,
easy as that. It's as
there's
simple as that.
there's less because it's been Christmas and New Year and everything. But I did a
Well, they
poll.
don't care anymore. They just don't care.
Let me
Not
just read
interested.
it out. I'm being like Steve now,
All
like
right,
being
sorry.
like Ricky. So I did a poll on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas to you all. We know it's a different and strange year for. Sorry, it's different and strange for us all this year. But whatever you're doing, we wish you a happy and peaceful day. Garlic bread. And then I put Kings of Leon or Best of Bob Marley. And I just noticed now when I've come back to it, and someone's commented in the comments, quite rightly, what artist is called Bob Martley?
You
And
spelled it wrong,
I've
didn't you?
favorited because I actually put Bob Martley instead of Bob Marley. Kings of Leon, 28%.
Hmm.
Best of Bob Marley, 72%. So I think we know where our audience is
Well,
leaning.
you've got to think about all the recording time. You've got to think about all the
Yeah,
marketing and that. You've got to
exactly.
think about all the soul. And you got to just give you that for free.
It's given out. It was free. Bob. So yeah,
He's
and
still
that's
going to pay
57.
you for the work, but here's a little something for you.
Here's a little something for you. Another comment I wanted to read. Now, this is like in the early days, we used to read comments from general comments about the show, not to us because we weren't getting any comments. This is a comment that you, Miles, retweeted. So this is a comment from Rebecca, and she just tweeted this. She didn't tweet at us, but she tweeted. We've retweeted it. It's just a nice little way to end the year. Nice comment to end the year with. There's a whole cult following, me included, of people who listen to Ricky Gervais' XFM radio show from 2001 to 2004 to fall asleep. I listen every night. Well, that's lovely, Rebecca, and we retweeted that. And I made a comment to you about the fact that it's got more likes than our tweets get already. But she's got no comment. But anyway, that's a separate point that we'll deal with off air,
No,
really. But
I completely agree, Rebecca. And again, we've mentioned this so many times. A lot of people use these shows to go to sleep.
yeah, I've
Not our show. I mean, you literally would be put to sleep listening to
yeah.
this show. But the XFM shows, you'll be sort of going to sleep with a lovely little smile across your face, and you'll wake up in a lovely mood and feel good, happy for the rest of the year.
Well,
Just
I always like when I fell asleep to the XFM shows. I use Pointless now, the game show, but I still listen to the XFM shows a lot, but I don't go to sleep usually. It's really funny when the dialogue that's being talked about weaves itself into the narrative of your
yeah,
dreams.
very weird.
That's nice. And,
XFM dreams. That's a good little question as well.
yeah.
Wonder if we get anything there.
Yeah, great.
Just a couple from me here. A couple from our lovely Patreons. If you do want to become a Patreon, I won't keep going on about it, but you know we are there. And if you want extra shows, I've done a couple already.
Video clips. We haven't got any on there now, but we will.
Yeah,
So.
Gary's done some poetry and stuff. But just a couple. This is from Daisy. And Daisy said, my boyfriend had his own Victoria Plum moment this year. He bought me a history book, took me to Waterstones, and declared couldn't think of anything worse than reading a history book. He still wrapped it up. Sick of it.
Oh,
That's bad,
yeah.
isn't it?
Sick of it. Yeah, well, that's the opposite to you because you want to read books, history
Can I
books.
have it?
Can I have
Oh,
it, please?
do you know what? It is the worst though buying presents. It really is. My girlfriend, you know, I bought her a lovely sort of fancy vase
And some gloves.
from from Italy because it just couldn't. I was like
A vase.
you know there's that.
A vase. You bought her a vase.
Yeah, but an expensive one.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know my girlfriend's an interior photographer. That's what she does.
Oh, yeah.
So she's gonna be into all that shit. I'm not.
Yeah, she can photograph that vase to photograph the shit out of that vase.
Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it? But no, it was more of a case of, you know, I'll just give you some what you want. You know, tell me what you want, and I'll do it. Not like I was watching, like I told you, the Christmas specials of The Office, and it's that horrible boyfriend of Dawn's.
Oh,
Yeah, what
yeah.
we do is
Great character.
work out what she spent, took that out of the account. It's like, oh, that's so.
He's
I mean,
such a great.
I know,
Him and
I know.
Finchy are so. They're great. They are just on a separate point. They are written so well, and they are hard to write characters that are quite that obnoxious. But they're very important, those two characters, because they contextualize Brent as not that bad really, because we're going to display to you behavior that is much worse during the series through what's his name? Yeah, what's his name? The boyfriend of Dawn. I can't remember. And Finchy. Actually, Brent's not that bad. Sorry, that's a point I
Yeah,
made.
no, I agree. And the last one from 2020 is from David. Let me do a run up on this one. It's from David McGurr. Now,
Yeah,
David
sorry,
did
David. I
he
believe
did
we owe you an apology.
he said it's David McGurr. Lol, love you guys. Hey David, we love you too, and thank you so much for becoming a Patreon. So
Thanks, David McGear.
your very kind contributions, and to all our listeners of this year, can I just say, from me, MP,
I
thank you
don't.
very. I'm just.
He means it
You
as well.
don't.
That's the thing. He
I
means
only
it.
did it to wind you.
Oh, go on, yeah.
Wind you up. I only did to wind you up. Look, thank you guys. We so appreciate you of all your kind words of support throughout the year. Whether you've got in touch with us on email, on Twitter, however you did. We honestly, because I think when we both started this show, we didn't really think anyone would listen. So it's been great to see this little community develop and expand throughout this time. And I'm really excited about the future. I'm excited about editing this show and yeah,
Not the other one. I echo that, and I think that it's fair to say this podcast has kind of evolved in a way which we didn't expect. We just imagined we would always be meeting at my flat, a pub in London, a pub in Brighton. We'll be recording live. We've had to transition to Skype, and it took a while to get used to. But hopefully, we're used to it now. But there is still kind of the odd audio issue, so we apologise for that. But obviously, there's not much we can do about that because we're forced to do it this way. But I enjoy it just as much, actually. I enjoy it as much as when we started, and that's the thing. And it sounds arrogant when people say, who produce something for other people, and say, well, as long as I enjoy it, that's fine. It's not fine that I enjoy it, but I do enjoy doing it, and I can speak for Mars. I know we both genuinely enjoy doing it, and it's kind of, it's nice that people listen,
yeah,
get in touch, give feedback, and keep doing it. And we 2020 is over, but we've roughly been going a year as well, about a year and a month. So it's been our anniversary time as well for the show. So to see how it's doing after this year is really encouraging. We really want to grow the audience. There's always going to be a ceiling. There's always going to be, because not many people have heard of the shows, but we want to grow it to other people who are mega fans of the show. So if you do know people who are just getting into the shows, or are already into the shows, do tell them about our podcast and let them know. And hopefully they can listen as well. But we really appreciate you guys for listening and getting in touch with us and tweeting and things like that. But just on Twitter, to like more of our stuff. My last message of 2020.
Can I just say to you, as a personal note to you, Gary, thank you for being such a great contributor to my podcast as well.
On Mars, it's an honour.
And also, I can't wait for these tiers to be a thing of the past, and for all of lockdowns to be restricted, not just for me but for everyone, so that we can all meet up and have a laugh and hopefully.
Sorry, I just thought, imagine it, because you said not just for me, but for everyone. Imagine if all the tiers were lifted, but just for you, no one else, just for you in the
That'd
world,
be fantastic.
in the country.
But no, hey, it'll be great. I can't wait to do shows live with you, Gary, again, because obviously
we did one this year, didn't we?
This is fine, but we are used to doing things live and in person, and I miss going out for drinks with you and going out for a Thai curry with you. And I'm really excited to do, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future that we can do some live events for all of you D-Trouties out there, and we can all meet in person. Wouldn't that be a lovely thing, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be doing lots of live events, but we thought of one, get together with listeners, and obviously we can't do it at the moment, and we probably can't do it as soon as the tier system ends, because it will go, you still won't be able to meet more than 1 or 2 or 3 people in a pub. But once you're allowed to meet with quite a few people. We'll get a few, maybe meet in London in a pub for those that can make it, and just sort of record a live show together. We'll tell them, whoever's coming.
I'm having an
The
Aston cider. If anyone wants to buy me a drink, just get that ready now.
Yeah, what is Chardonnay? 250 milliliters, not 175 for me. But no, we'll kind of review the show together, and it'll be a nice process. But that is a way off, obviously. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so 2021. Really hope it brings all the good things for you. Mars said, I think you were going to make the point, which I'll make now. That we wondered what you were doing for New Year's, so tweet us and email us. Let us know. We'll discuss it in the new year when we start our next show.
And I'll always be on email because goodness knows I've got snout else to do.
Yeah.
If you want to chat, just let me know.
And one day in every 27, I check the email as well. Even though it's on my email account, I don't even check it. No, I do check it, really. You're doing whatever you're doing tonight. Hope it goes well. And yeah, I know it gets all kind of like hokey and kind of cliche and things, but I do hope 2021 brings happiness, love. For me, this is I hope 2021 brings you happiness, basically just happiness and things you want.
A penis? What did you say? A penis?
A penis. Yeah, I hope 2021 brings you a little willy. And on that note, we'll say goodbye.
Hey, no. Wait, I wish we could say goodbye. But one little thing we do have to wrap up, Gaz.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm bored of talking to you. Is our Trout Spinners Library. Every week, Gary and I select a song that has got some personal significance or importance, or just a song that we like. And we put it into our little Spotify playlist, which I'll put a link into our description. So you can see the new year in with our musical selection. There's a lot of Oasis in there, but there's also other stuff in there. Musicals, Christmas songs, really a whole smorgasbord of different genres.
We put in... the theme music to
the Magic Roundabout,
which it means so much to us. It means
10,
nothing to anyone
9, 8, 7. Do. So what are you going to put in?
I'm going to go for a song. Came out when I was at school. It was a huge hit. You might think, oh, was he into that artist? Not particularly overall, but it was. She was an absolute.
No, it's Gary Glitter.
She was an absolute phenomenon when she came out. Still is very famous, and this is a classic, brilliantly written. I'm not sure who wrote it, but brilliant pop song. She performs it well. It's Britney Spears, "Baby One More Time."
Yes, love that song. Great
song.
What's yours? I've got two because I thought because it's a double episode, I'll put in two songs as well.
I couldn't be bothered to do that.
No, I don't. You don't have to. But Britney Spears, that more than makes up for it because I love Britas. Wonderwall, the cover.
Oh yeah, because they play.
Because they do play it in this episode, and I thought it would be sacrilege if we didn't. Because, as you know, Gary, we've actually had a few listeners saying that they've learned so much from Oasis. I'm
so pleased. That's my favourite comments.
That's that to add. It's all he's wanted to do in his life. But so that is an actual great cover, and it's kind of nice to not put in the original as well.
And actually, they mention how good it is, and it is. But actually, since subsequently after that. I don't know, during the last 15 years at some point, Noel Gallagher has said it is a better version than my version. I
can't agree with that, but that's great.
That's Noel. That's Noel.
That's mad.
And actually,
wow.
If you go to see Noel Gallagher and his High Flying Birds now, he often plays Wonderwall, sings it like that in that arrangement.
Really?
Yeah, that's how he sings it now.
That's mad.
He sings it like that. So. He really has taken on board that version as like, wow,
good on him.
Well,
that's nice to know. And we also spoke about it in our Patreon episode. We lovely listener spoke about Sean Wright, talked about to get our opinions on the Christmas special of The Office. So if you do want to hear those thoughts, do get to head over to Patreon. And we did talk about that final song in The Office. And it is Yazoo, Only You. And I thought we couldn't finish 2020 without popping that on our little playlist, could we, really?
No, good choices there. Good choice.
So however you're celebrating and seeing in the new year, thank you so much for listening. I look forward to doing some shows with you in the future, Gary.
Yeah, next year. And have a good New Year's Eve. It's going to be weird. You're going to be doing something different to what you usually do.
Well, we're going to be drunk.
But I hope you enjoy it. And actually, these shows are going to come out on New Year's Eve. So yeah, hope you're doing something better than just listening to this for the whole evening. But yeah, whatever you're doing, have a good one, and we'll see you in 2021.
Happy New Year.